You know, now that I've really started combing through Symphogear as a series and jumping down the rabbit hole like a madman, I realized that the series is ultimately just a me series. You know, a series that you like simply because of the fact that it hits all the niches that you enjoy, so you have to love it by default, no matter how bad it can be, is, or will be in the future. After all, not only is it a Mahou Shoujo series, I know it's also tokusatsu too, but don't remind me where we're at right now, but also having mecha designs and being actually consistent with its power scaling, I'm forced to love it. And as such, with any series with any sort of scaling and multiple seasons, a common question that pops up is if one new group introduced into the story can beat an existing group in the story, whether it be a group that's above the main characters already or a pre-existing group of villains from a previous arc. That being said, the question I want to go over is how would Saint-Germain and the Bavarian Illuminati fare against Carol and the Autoscorers? While this question may seem a bit obvious, this is actually a more interesting matchup than a lot of people think, so I'll be going over the hypothetical versus battle between the two factions, and more importantly, who would win. So with that out of the way and not going through any further hoops, let's get into the battle of the alchemists. So before I do get into their scaling, I do want to preface that we'll be going over 3 different scenarios for this versus battle. The first one being Carol and the Autoscorers from the end of GX versus Saint-Germain, Adam, and the rest of the Bavarian Illuminati from the end of AXZ. The second one would be Carol and Elf 9 and the Autoscorers we see from the end of XV against the Bavarian Illuminati and Noble Red. And the final scenario would be Carol and Elf 9 and the Autoscorers at the end of XV versus the Illuminati, Divine Tiki, and Noble Red with Shemha amps, all of which I will be dubbing as scenarios 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The reason I will be going over all 3 different scenarios would be provided at the end of the video, but just to keep it brief, Carol is a different character in all of these sections of the story, so it would only be fair to go over all of them individually. Starting chronologically, it would be with Carol and the Autoscorers. The Autoscorers are all pretty much around the same tier of strength, with each of them being strong enough to completely overwhelm Symphogear users with ease. While this may sound mid, these would be Symphogear users who have battled a buffed Nephilim whose power was so massive that the Symphogear users required X-Drive to defeat, stating that should it be left unchecked, the Nephilim would destroy the planet. Each of these dolls were able to casually dominate the rest of the main cast without issue, requiring them to need a power that's stronger than a climax song and more direct, but could not rely on the X-Drive due to the massive amount of phonic gain that it required. This is neat not only because of the fact that the previous video already did go over the Ignite scaling, with Ignite being around a 10 times multiplier per level, but these characters were already around the small planet level in base when fighting against the Autoscorers after fighting the Nephilim. On top of that, the users believe that just like Carol, they would have needed Ignite for the Autoscorers, which just means that it was more evidence to push these Autoscorers to be around the Negretto Ignite levels of strength. As for speed, all of these dolls were able to keep up and react to these Ignite users, all of which at this point in time being around 10 times the speed of light with Negretto. As we went over in the Hibiki video, as Ignite is around a 10 times amp to all stats, with all these characters being relative to Hibiki and Chris, who were able to dodge light in base against Miku and the Shenshojin. These same Autoscorers are able to contend with these Ignite module characters, even if they do ultimately lose in combat to these amped Ignite multipliers, at least until Carol comes in. Carol, being the head of the Autoscorers, is so strong that her regular singing is vastly stronger than a climax song, with a climax song being an amp of around 5 times, meaning that her doing what the Symphogear users are doing regularly is just 5 times stronger than them. This requires Hibiki, Chris, and Tsubasa to use Ignite's second and third stages, which are each their own Ignite level amp and power, only to still be clapped by Carol, who says that her singing is upwards of 7 billion, yes that is with a B instead of an M, songs in strength, allowing her to combat 6 different Symphogear users with X-Drive all at once, with the fallout of her strength being similar to a small star. However, what if I told you that this Carol, who was able to fight these several different X-Drive users at once, was actually heavily nerfed. So nerfed in fact that this is barely a fraction of her power. After the release of Shemha, Carol actually fights against this revived Shemha, being able to tag her and dodge attacks from her before transformation, which is wild considering that this revived Shemha is the strongest villain that any of the Symphogear users have ever faced, as she was able to fold every single one of them all at once. Not only that, but during that fight, the only reason that Carol had not beaten Shemha there was simply because of the Symphogear's evil vanishing properties via the Faust Robe, with it being heavily implied that she would have killed Shemha and Miku had it not been for the Symphogear with the world dissection by Alcahest. This is also implied heavily with the alchemy being stated several times to be coming close to shooting down God, though like I said, it was ultimately stopped by the Symphogear. However, Carol literally right after this solo interaction was on par with burning X-Drive characters, with X-Drive being a multiplier on top of their amalgam multiplier of 1000 times, being another 35 billion times increase in strength and speed, and Carol was just able to keep up with all of them and combo with them at the same time, on top of being able to block and overpower Shemha's outer physics with golden transmutation. I know it seems like I'm going over Carol a bit more than the Autoscorers, but this is due to the Autoscorers not really having too many feats outside of basically being fodder, as that was what they were designed to be. Most of our feats for these scorers just come from fighting against Symphogear users post Nephilim. However, that's really all we get, as we only really get 2 fights with them before they're basically bet. We do later see them fighting Noble Red and Scrapped Bodies in the Chateau de Tafage, but they were quite literally off screen by them, with the only feat we really got from them during this fight was Farah parrying Vanessa's hand and destroying it with Sword Break, and with Mika hitting them really hard. As for hacks, alchemists do have the ability of elemental manipulation. However, there are a couple of others, like the Autoscorers being able to steal and absorb memories via contact, which they convert into strength with alchemy. But there are 3 other hacks that are unique here. Starting with Mika, Mika has her Burning Heart, which allows her to amplify her power drastically enough to fight against Kirika Ashirabe with Ignite. Secondly would be Farah's Sword Break, which destroys anything that can be considered a sword regardless of strength. And finally, Carol having Alcahest, which is a miniature version of the World Dissection with the Chateau de Tafage, of which it transforms anything that is touched into prima material, which is the basic building block of everything in the Symphogear verse. On top of this, Carol can also amplify her power with Phonic Gain rather than just alchemy, which increases her power enough to the point where she is able to fight against the Symphogear users without having to worry about them in Ignite, unlike she did previously with their first encounter. She also technically does have the ability to utilize Unison, however, as for the other Autoscorers, we wouldn't necessarily know if they have that ability as well. She's seen to do this with the other Burning X-Drive users, however, we don't see if they can do that as well, so we would just be putting that on the back burner for right now. The final thing on the end of Carol and the Autoscorers, Carol's ability to be able to transform into the giant lion mecha. With the lion mecha being so powerful that it required all 5 of the Symphogear users aside from Hibiki to funnel all of their X-Drive energy through their arm gears to strike a single direct point in order to break through, as every other attack was just being bounced off of it. Like I said, we don't necessarily know exactly how much stronger an arm gear makes a user in the Hibiki video, however, we do know that 5 of the 6 Symphogear users using X-Drive and funneling it all through their arm gears were able to destroy the hull of the Lion Mecha, with Carol saying that they were just 1 arm gear too short before completely destroying and damaging her. While the regular attacks from the X-Drive Symphogear users weren't doing anything or even scratching the surface of it. So the giant lion mecha would be around a 5 X-Drive's boost level in power. However, Carol never uses this form at the end of XV, so we don't necessarily know if she just doesn't have access to it or she just believed that she wasn't able to utilize it well against Shemha, but just for the sake of this video, we'll just say that she does have access to it, mainly because nothing else is stating otherwise. Going over the Bavarian Illuminati, we do have some scaling to go over with them, starting off with Saint-Germain, Cagliostro, and Prelati. With these 3, we get a general range of where they would be as a whole from their combat with the users, thanks to their fight with the Alkanoids that seals off space, creating a pocket dimension with its own stars, planets, and nebulas. While these characters need Ignite to overwhelm the Alkanoids on their first encounter, these users would later no longer need Ignite, being able to break out of the subspaces in just base. These same users would later end up fighting against Cagliostro and Prelati, with the users users not only obtaining Unison, which was stated to be a major factor to make up for the loss of Ignite, but also a hacked out Ignite that was upgraded from the split with the Philosopher's Stone, which each of these being around a 10 times amp, seeing as how Kirika and Shirabe were both able to heavily damage Perlati and force her and Cagliostro to retreat without the need of Ignite. With Cagliostro noting that she couldn't let Saint-Germain fight against these upgraded gear users with these amps. However, Saint-Germain was able to fight alongside a base Hibiki who had been able to press Adam for a little bit, someone who even Saint-Germain thought was going to be a difficult opponent for Hibiki. Following this, we have Adam and Tiki, and while Tiki has no feats aside from the divine weapon, Adam does have a bit of scaling off of the final bout with the users, as Adam would fight all 6 Symphogear users in Baphomet, blatantly overpowering them and requiring them to fight against them with X-Drive level amps by converting the energy of Saint-Germain's Faust Robe, and for Hibiki to unlock Golden Transmutation to beat him. But surprisingly, none of these previous characters are the real high end, as the high end we have involves Noble Red, who pressured Hibiki and company after the fight with the coffin, something Adam was stated to need the divine energy to beat. Now there are a couple of conflicting statements from this group in particular, as the users state that they are weaker than Saint-Germain and her group, as well as Noble Red also kind of confirming this, but the thing is that these guys had access to Ignite on top of Unison, which they did not need for Noble Red, which could just mean that they weren't seen as much of a threat for any transformation or Unison for. They would later need a transformation to battle against them with Daedalus End in the form of Amalgam, which is an increase relative to Rubeto Ignite, so these statements could just be seen as implications involving the narrative, as they had lost Ignite before their battle with the coffin. However, just to go over it very briefly and summarize, Hibiki and company fought and destroyed the coffin, which Adam needed the divine weapon for, and Noble Red were able to use Daedalus End, which threatened those same Symphogear users before unlocking Amalgam. The other high end would be Divine Tiki, however the most we got from it was that it was considered to be strong enough to fight and defeat the coffin, which would be on the level of the gear users at the start of XV, but this is ultimately just relative thinking since it only had one fight, and it was up against the God Killer herself, so yeah. Finally, we will be going over the Shemha amps with Noble Red, as the Shemha amps with Noble Red end up giving Noble Red a massive increase in power, being able to fight against these upgraded gears with Amalgam, with Malark stating that they wouldn't even need Daedalus End to beat the Symphogear users, even after seeing Amalgam in front of them. This would not only require the users to use Unison, but it would also require them to use Amalgam at the same time, such as when Maria and Tsubasa needed to fight against Malark with Unison after fighting against her and the Blood Puppet, and Kirika and Shirabe needing to fight against V combined with Amalgam and Unison. As for speed scaling, we do have Saint-Germain keeping up with Biki during the fight against Adam, as well as fighting against him one-on-one, with Cagli and Perlati being relative to her, Adam being much faster in Baphomet and keeping up with X-Drive level users, and Noble Red, while not having as much speed scaling as the rest, still being able to keep up with and tag these upgraded gears. As for a brief list of the sheer amount of hacks that this team has access to, the Philosopher's Stone burns away anything that could be considered impure, Divine Tiki can negate damage and massively increase attack power by sacrificing versions of herself from parallel universes, Adam gains a massive amp with Baphomet and has the ability of telepathy, which can manifest into the physical world as a foam, which he uses to slyly attack characters. Like he literally just got these guys off guard. Like, what a menace, dude. On top of Golden Transmutation, Malark's Seal can convert enemies to do their bidding, though it is kind of whenever you do have them only being really caught off guard instead of breaking their spirit, alongside everyone who does have the elemental manipulation with alchemy. And finally, Saint-Germain, Cagliostro, and Perlati have Dying Light, which is basically the alchemist's version of a climax song. Honestly, there's just so many, mainly because of the fact that there are, you know, way more characters. Well, not necessarily way more, just like, you know, a bit more. Going over scenario 1 first, this one's a bit of a no-brainer. By the start of AXV, the Symphogear users have already surpassed their X-Drive level amps, as we see they defeat the Alkanoids that transports them to a pocket dimension with various stars, planets, and nebulas, all in just Negretto Ignite. On top of that, not only did they need the additional amp in the form of Unison to fight against Saint-Germain, Cagliostro, and Perlati, but on their fight with Adam, they needed another X-Drive level amp that they achieved with Hexa conversion on the energy made with Saint-Germain's Faust Robe. Meanwhile, Carol in the Autoscorers high end is that Carol was described as a miniature sun when the energy from her lion mecha was being let loose. The Autoscorers themselves also wouldn't be of too much help, as they were kind of just assaulted by Negretto Ignite users. There is the argument that they were actually designed to die, as it was stated by Farah and Carol that the reason that the Autoscorers were made were to force them to use Ignite, so they could have higher scaling and could be relative to Carol, but to say that they were on Carol's level is really debatable. Farah would be the only one of real use here as a secret weapon, as Saint-Germain does in fact use a sword with her gun, and that there was the time that Adam used his arm as a sword. But aside from that, there's only so much you can gaslight someone into thinking that kendama is a sword. So, to make it simple, we have a group of Saint-Germain, Cagliostro, Perlati, and Adam, all of which who are around galaxy level or above, against a group of dolls and an alchemist who are at the very most small star level. Scenario 2 is a bit different, as this would be Carol and the Autoscorers from XV against the Illuminati. Now, this one is more interesting due to various different reasons. However, for the first one, Carol here is a completely different beast compared to the end of GX, as this Carol here is unnerved by rejections and fought against Shemha, while Noble Red gets added to the list of adversaries. Starting from the opposite end, the highest end of scaling that the Illuminati has comes from Noble Red, rather than Adam or Saint-Germain, with Noble Red all fighting against the Symphogear users with upgraded gears around episode 4. During this fight, the three use their ultimate technique, Daedalus End, to try and finish off the users, but get stopped by Amalgam, with these upgraded gears fighting and destroying the coffin holding Shemha's bracelet, all in base. This coffin was confirmed to be Adam's primary goal in needing the divine energy, since he needed an energy strong enough to beat the coffin and take the relic within it, which is shocking considering that Adam was already fighting against X-Drive level Symphogear users prior to this in his Baphomet form before Hibiki used Golden Transmutation. And against these amped Symphogears, Noble Red is able to trap them within Daedalus's labyrinth and require them to use Amalgam before they, got it. However, this gaggle of misfits incidentally fought against Carol. Twice. And not only were they bested twice, but Daedalus End was stopped by Carol just singing. Carol did state that she used up too much energy during their initial combat, but within the following days she would have enough energy to fight against Shemha alongside 6 burning X-Drive Symphogear users after fighting her solo and using Alcahest, which is a miniature version of the World Dissection from the end of GX. And while you can't say that Carol on both occasions with Noble Red stated that she used up too much power, the fact that Noble Red needed an excess amount of blood so that they would be able to utilize Daedalus End in order to fight Carol just for Carol to break out of it makes Carol just strong. I don't know what else to say. So this one, while it is kind of just as obvious as the first scenario, does show that Carol does have a massive leap in power that ends up making her just completely overwhelm the Illuminati. Scenario 3 is the apex of all of these factors, with us having the Illuminati, Adam with Baphomet, Noble Red with Shemha Roids, and the Divine Weapon. Now this was an especially interesting one because Carol just solos, there's no point. Adam and Saint-Germain get rocked and fodderized, Noble Red with Shemha Roids get rocked because of the inherent scaling with all the other X-Drive users and being able to damage Shemha, and the Divine Weapon doesn't even really have a chance to be it for reasons I will explain. You can say, oh, they just overwhelm her with sheer numbers, but Carol has been shown to fight against multiple different characters at once without issue. What's more is that throughout the entirety of XV, we never actually see her use the Lion Mecha, something that is stated to be her strongest transformation that required 5 of the 6 Symphogear users to focus their X-Drive energy into their arm gear into just so they can break through the shell. This is also on top of the fact that the X-Drive users previously stated that they also had an advantage only after they had achieved X-Drive, making the Lion Mecha potentially several X-Drive amps worth of power. So with the inherent fight against Shemha giving Carol insane scaling, the only way you can have the Illuminati win is if you can somehow scale all of the Illuminati to burning X-Drive characters, but you just can't. There's no way. The only way to wank them to that high of a proportion would be to say that just Shemha and Noble Red are equivalent to Shemha in power, but if you do that, you have to ignore the fights with Shemha and Noble Red characters losing to Amalgam characters, which would in turn ignore the keyword for Amalgam being an alternative to Ignite, giving us an immeasurable amp in strength. You have Elsa's V Combine getting obliterated by an Amalgam Kirika Shirabe, Millard getting bodied by an Amalgam Tsubasa Amadia, Vanessa getting have her body destroyed by Christy Hibiki just ramming into her with Cocoon. There's no way anything can even come close to going, yeah, they're strong with Shemha. However, even if we do go off of that, we'd have to go over Carol like that as well, since burning X-Drive stacked on top of Amalgam, so yeah, I really just brushed off everyone in AXZ and I'm not really even going to go over them, but that's because of the fact that there's no need to. Adam already scales below start of XV characters since they were able to fight against the coffin that he needed the Divine Weapon to beat, and Saint-Germain and the others just scale below Adam, so they just get farted on. The only other thing that would be an issue would be the Divine Weapon, but even with that, Carol has Alcahest, which she attempted to use on Shemha to a degree of success, as even Shemha thought that it would work and praised Carol for standing up to her, with the only reason Outcast failing being due to the Symphogear Faust Robes' evil banishing properties. To be fair, this can be used to the Illuminati's advantage since the Philosopher's Stone burns away impurities as long as you use the logic behind the Symphogear's reaction to Outcast, but that's assuming that Carol doesn't just one-shot all the lower end first. Not like she really needs Outcast for them anyways, or whatever. And the funniest part is that you can't even make the argument that Carol doesn't know about it because of the fact that Elf 9 knew about it, someone who was built off of specific memories of Carol, so unless research behind the Philosopher's Stone suddenly just appeared after Carol died, there's no point in believing that she wouldn't just hound after the Illuminati first. Like, just scaling the Burning X drive is just incredibly unfair for the side of the Illuminati. That and just blocking Shemha's outer physics. On top of all of this, every feat we've seen from Carol in XV is strictly using the memories of the intelligence built by Elf 9, which is something that also is not accounted for. You're probably thinking, why does that matter? Elf 9's fodder. And you'd be right. That is, if Carol couldn't use Elf 9's memories for alchemy, something that is heavily implied that she would be able to do, but never does. In fact, after the Shemha fight, Elf 9 states that Carol only burned away all of her memories and none of Elf 9's, meaning that she just had power she never used. And if we do go off of a composite Carol who has all of her memories from GX, yeah, it's pretty clear to see who would be the victor here. Oh yeah, didn't really go over the Autoscorers, did I? All the Autoscorers get one tapped by Noble Red. Boom. Simple. Thank you for watching this train wreck, I really appreciate it. Thankfully, I've already gone over Symphogear scaling in the last video, so now that I have, expect another 2-month wait while I go over another series I really want to go over, because watching an anime with multiple seasons multiple times takes significantly longer than just binging a 60 chapter manga in a day. I do know that Symphogear is a really touchy subject, more or less because of the fact that there is a lot of stuff that can go unexplained in this video, so I really do advise that you do watch the Hibiki Tachibana video that I uploaded earlier so that you can get a better perspective on exactly where these characters' feats lie. After all, a lot of it is under the assumption that you already know the Symphogear scaling as is, so catching up with that Tachibana video just makes everything feel cleaner. With the way I am, I might just put out one more Symphogear video while I'm in the middle of going over the next Mahou Shoujo, but knowing how lazy I am, that seems more like an inevitability than a maybe. Either that or I'll just make another Sailor Moon video, I guess. Why not? That being said, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, or leave a massive dislike and tell me how 8 dudes jumping someone should have been the obvious outcome, and as always, ciao.
今ここで限界を超えろ。それしか道はねえ。俺たち金色の夜明け団だ。クローバー王国最強の魔法騎士団だ。Whoop, whoop.